Good afternoon and welcome to the meeting of the Committee for Democratic Services. May I ask the Democratic Services Officer to take us through the guidance for the meeting, please?
Diolch, Chair. My colleague James will take you through the housekeeping, if that's okay. Thanks.
Thanks both. So just may I remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording will be archived for future viewing. And if a participant wishes to speak, can they raise their hand using the remote raise hand function? When invited to address by the chair, please can all participants ensure their microphone and camera is on to ensure they can be seen and heard when actively participating. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. So please can I welcome all committee members and also anyone else watching the live meeting broadcast to the meeting of Democratic Services Committee today. Thanks, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr, James.
Thank you very much, James. I'm Councillor Ian Johnson. I'm the Chair of the Democratic Services Committee. I'm using translation today, so you will be hearing the translator's voice. If you are experiencing any issues with this, please let me know. Thank you for joining us on Friday afternoon. We had to change the date of the meeting because of the timetable for one of the items this evening. In particular, the reshaping scrutiny. We've also got an item on a review of the questionnaire for the Democracy and Boundaries Commission Cymru. So we'll move on to item 1. Any apologies for absence? I've received one from Councillor Hamilton. Are there any other apologies to be received?
Dwi ddim yn gweld.
I don't note any hands up. So I'll move on to the minutes of the last meeting. Does anybody have anything to raise or happy to note?
Cynghorydd Hanks yn hapus i nod.
Councillor Hanks, happy to note. Anybody else?
Thank you, Chair. My translation has just dropped out. I'm happy to approve the minutes. I'm echoing Ryan. With just the exception of my name, I'm down as S.C. Hanks. I don't know where the C is from.
Okay, so only.
Okay, so we'll accept the minutes and we will take out the erroneous C. Anything else?
No, happy with everything.
Great. Diolch yn fawr, Cynghorydd Hanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hanks. So I'm happy to second that. Item 3 is whether there are any declarations of interest to make and the nature of those interests. Anything?
Nag oes.
No. Okay, so we'll move on to item 4, which takes us to the Cabinet from the 6th of March, which relates to the reshaping of scrutiny. James, if I might ask you to take us through this for committee.
Diolch, Chair. Afternoon, members. So first item for me today is to talk through the reshaping scrutiny proposals, which I hope you're aware through both the paper attached as part of the agenda pack and also the wider briefing sessions that have been held for members. I'm not going to run through the report verbatim and largely take it as read, but aim to provide an overview of why we're proposing the changes to scrutiny ranges, what they could look like in terms of design and ways of working, the potential benefits, and how members have been helping in shaping this proposal. Firstly, I want to emphasise it's still in its design phase, with lots of ongoing dialogue being fed in to support the design of any future arrangements. So very much here today for comments and feedback, which are very, very welcome. As members will be aware, this is also being considered in other committee settings, so there are many opportunities for members to have their voice heard surrounding these proposals. And considering the terms of reference in this committee, I really welcome viewpoints with particular reflection upon the potential member development needs required as a result of any changes, particularly considering of knowledge and skills. Consideration of democratic services capacity, skills and resources to enable this change, and just the general principles, particularly in regards to changes in ways of working for members. So firstly, I'm going to cover off why we're looking to make the change briefly and drawing upon a range of drivers. I'm not going to labour these points in exhaustive detail, but the reason for the change, essentially, there's been almost a perfect storm of potential drivers, so including residents' feedback as part of the Let's Talk in the Live Vale survey, members' feedback from the annual scrutiny impact survey. The recent performance panel assessment identified this as an area for improvement as formal recommendations. There have been a series of Audit Wales recommendations relating to the effectiveness of scrutiny in recent years. Looking at developments and good practice in scrutiny from other Welsh councils and beyond. And also it's an opportune moment with the council's new corporate plan recently approved by council, Bill 2030. So I'm just going to provide a brief overview of the proposals in no particular order, but I must emphasise at this point that members will not be losing anything in terms of information. This is being considered to really consider the right place and the right channels to receive this information and distill really what we believe scrutiny to be in the Vale of Glamorgan. So in terms of the proposals, we are looking at the removal of information-only and noting type items from formal committee agendas, which do take up a considerable amount of committee time, as noted within the report analysis. So these are almost to be released from the scrutiny space and provided through an alternative means, such as whether it be briefing sessions or formal publications, etc. So members will still receive the information just through a different forum. Officers are being worked with to consider beforehand what value they anticipate from scrutiny and look to improve the quality of their recommendations. So there's a brief chief officer session next week. We are looking to deliver a session with them surrounding what is the potential benefit, what are these changes looking like, how do they see scrutiny really adding value to their work. So conversations are very much ongoing with colleagues from organisational development in particular, so how we best roll this out systematically to all officers to actually get them to really think working scrutiny add the most value to the work of the council. Aligning to the corporate plan and focusing on outcomes, this is proposing a change from the existing 5 committees, last reviewed in 2016, to 4 committees based upon the outcomes of starting well, living well, place and resources. There are potential remits identified within the report, but I would emphasise on that element that firstly, it's not an expectation for all areas to receive coverage by a committee on an annual basis. And secondly, that the focus should really be on the outcomes, such as starting well when considering this items of scrutiny rather than focusing on services. And we will be looking at the introduction of systematic task and finish investigative scrutiny, so on a proposed 12-week basis per committee, which would allow scrutiny committees to identify their own areas of interest and increasingly shape the policy direction of agenda by the council by making proactive recommendations based on the information gathered and the use of expert witnesses, including wider public participation, hopefully improving our residents' involvement within the scrutiny function and the wider work of the council. Currently, this is undertaken inconsistently and inequitably across all committees, unfortunately due to the capacity within my team to be able to support this. Also, I appreciate this is a big commitment from members in terms of time, effort and energy. It's anticipated these task and finish groups would be approximately 6 members. So any additional workload as a result of this would not be consistently felt by all members, and ultimately any involvement in these groups is at their discretion. We will be looking to potentially change the frequency of scrutiny meetings from monthly, as is currently, to bi-monthly meetings. The main 2 reasons for this change being proposed are based on the removal of the information-only and noting type items, which are discussed at the start, as these lead to a considerable number of items and believing they can be removed from the agenda to share. It's important that there's no intention to try and shoehorn 2 months' worth of existing agendas into a singular agenda with an elongated meeting. It's very much actually, let's take a step back and actually look what has been put on those agendas moving forward in the future. And then the second reason for looking at the meeting frequency is in order to facilitate the task and finish work, we need to release capacity within the Democratic Services team, who are limited with no additional resources on the horizon due to the ongoing financial pressures I'm sure you can all appreciate. The current arrangements in place them in a cycle of administered meetings, whereas actually it really presents an opportunity to allow them to add as much value as they can in the scrutiny space. As equally, the Task and Measure research function was a key requirement of the Local Government and Elections Act 21. Whilst not the obviously direct responsibility of the Democratic Services team, performance arrangements are also currently being reviewed, as currently each performance and finance monitoring report are presented to each committee on a quarterly basis, and there's been consistent feedback from members and officers surrounding the value of these kinds of arrangements and the quality of recommendations being made versus the time commitment involved from all. This is proposed to bring members together from all committees on twice-a-year basis to discuss the performance plan holistically, enabling cross-committee learning and hopefully richer recommendations surrounding what needs to be done to improve the direction of the corporate plan. On that point, I would like to note that financial monitoring would still be overseen by the Resources Committee on a regular basis. So there, brief whistle stop with the proposals that are being proposed are still very much in the outline phase, and any comments are welcome, but we're looking to formulate a proposal to be agreed at full council at the end of April, with a view to hopefully appoint members to any potential arrangements in terms of committees at the May annual meeting. I'd also like to note this is very much the primary phase of committee improvement, and this isn't a hard stop. Once we've done this, we stop, and we will be looking at once this has been implemented, elements such as partnership scrutiny and other arrangements, just to see actually are those functions, could they be better served to be able to maximise their output. So hopefully that's given a very brief overview of any proposed changes to the scrutiny arrangements, and just to complement the report. And I'd very much like to just open the floor to any comments around it, just as from this committee, and just to try and help further shape this proposal as we look to moving forward. So if there are any comments from members, that would be very welcomed. Thank you, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr, James.
Thank you very much, James. So as you will know, this is part of a process which has been... Councillor Priest, I haven't asked you to come in yet. Sorry, thank you.
Yes, can I give George's running late?
Okay, right.
And so that's the first thing, but I
Na i alw chi mewn.
Okay, I'll call you in just a moment. Thank you very much. Councillor Carroll is running a bit late. Thank you for letting us know. So this is a part of a process, as James said, of a process which will come to an end at the end of April in the full council meeting. So chairs and vice chairs of committees have received a presentation. Group leaders have received a presentation on this, and there was a presentation for all of the councillors last week. But I think today is the first time that there's been an opportunity to talk about the recommendations in a public meeting and not an internal meeting. So I'm looking forward to hear from councillors, especially from the backbenches. I'd like to share some of my concerns in relation to reducing the number of committees from 5 to 4. I would argue that we should stick to 5. I've asked for some dummy agendas so that we'd be able to see what exactly we'd be looking at and be able to discuss in scrutiny committees if there's an intention to reduce the number of meetings, what type of things would be on the agenda in future if these plans become a reality. How exactly will we ensure that we scrutinise partner work, and how would we make sure that there's a call-in process which truly works? Because this is the opportunity for councillors, especially backbenchers, and councillors from the opposition parties, to be able to publicly and verbally discuss with council officers, and I am concerned about losing out on some of those opportunities. So after I've shared a couple of my concerns, may I ask whether anybody from the committee would like to speak on this item?
Cofiwch bydd hyn yn mynd ymlaen at
Remember, this will go on to the Governance and Audit Committee on Monday, and then on to the Corporate Resources Committee next Wednesday. Councillor Bruce.
a dwi'n weld cynghorydd Carol.
And I can see that Councillor Carroll now is here as well.
Oes unrhyw sylwadau?
Are there any comments?
Cynghorydd Bruce.
Councillor Bruce.
Cynghorydd Bruce? Ti eisiau pwyso?
Do you want to press the button?
Apologies, I forgot to tick the box. I have two questions. First of all, what are the potential benefits? Have I missed that, or was it just a statement? And the papers that are for noting now, how will they be shown, given, disseminated in the future?
Okay, James,
James, would you like to come in to answer each one individually, or would you like to Councillor Carroll to come in first and then provide a response for both?
If I could come in individually, if that's okay, Chair, on that one.
Yep.
In terms of the potential benefits, I think they are vast in terms of the opportunities presented. I'm not going to sit here and say it'll all be all singing, all dancing as of the first session in the middle of May. Everything will be revolutionised overnight, and I'm not naive enough to say that at this juncture. But in terms of the longer term benefits, I see it as very much involved, particularly in terms of one, in terms of really focusing the agenda, in terms of what are the meaningful items of scrutiny, in terms of in terms of really focusing on the items where scrutiny can actually maximise its value in terms of recommendations, rather than as is current practice, there is a lot of noting type items with no meaningful recommendations are made. So it's looking to almost try and really focus the committee time and space on this value adding activity. In terms of investigative scrutiny, I think that's a positive step for me in terms of really moving on to the committees leading their agendas, essentially, in terms of where they want them to explore, make recommendations and make proposals before decisions are made. So not just receiving information and receiving or being asked for input from cabinet surrounding decisions, but actually being able to proactively identify areas of interest, such as, give me a crude example, but so community transport within a health and care setting, being able to proactively make recommendations in that space, which I think is a real change in terms of the council's approach to policy and decision making. And then I think probably there is also the large benefit in terms of just in terms of councillor member wellbeing, in terms of and our officers' wellbeing as well. At the same time, there are a lot of meetings where I think they can be reduced in terms of the frequency and volume and the timing, just based on the sheer effort and energy that does require from all people to participate within them, because of how long those meetings are currently and how frequent they are. So I think it's a great opportunity to release some capacity in that space. And then finally, I think there's an element around public perception and public participation as well, in terms of actually there's been feedback from residents in terms of their ability to get involved in democratic processes, and particularly through the task finish work, there's a real opportunity for them to get involved as expert witnesses, etc., to be able to have their voice surrounding those surrounding areas of potential interest, and hopefully will improve their understanding of the work of the council and their ability to actually participate in its work and shape in its direction. So I think there are a number of benefits for it. And in terms of the next steps element, a follow-up members briefing session has been arranged for next Thursday. So calendar invite was sent out late yesterday. So as I mentioned, the proposals are still very much in their shaping stages. It's very much an ongoing piece of work, which is causing me a lot of long days at the moment, trying to shape it, agree it, get what it could look like, etc. We are looking to present an almost final version essentially before it goes formally to cabinet and then through the motions essentially to a full council. So it's that invite was disseminated to all members yesterday, but if you haven't received it, Councillor Bruce, if you do let me know on that point, I'm more than happy to make sure when the team can get that shared for you. And I hope that answers on that, those questions for you. Thanks all.
Okay. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much, James. Could I ask Councillor Carroll to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, James, for the remarks just now. I, first of all, from my point of view, agree that we need to improve the scrutiny process within the authority. I have, over the past few weeks, cited many failings, in my view, of the authority's performance, and obviously scrutiny and accountability are important when it comes to improving that performance. I won't go into those issues here, but they have been well documented previously. I welcome the opportunity to improve the processes, but some of the ideas that have been suggested, I actually believe will have the opposite effect. I think that at a time when we're pushing for greater levels of scrutiny and accountability, even floating the idea of reducing the number of scrutiny committees in the way that has been suggested, in my mind, is a very aggressive step. I think that it will be perceived, if it does go ahead, by the public to be an attempt to actually reduce scrutiny. It won't be seen by the public as an attempt to improve it. It will be seen as a way of reducing the capacity on existing committees to really delve into the authority's performance, to look into things like budgetary decisions and other policy priorities and proposals. So from my point of view, anything that reduces the number of scrutiny committees that we have is a no-no. I will not be supporting it and do not think that that is in the interests of good governance or accountability. I very much hope that that proposal can be looked at again before final proposals are brought forward. I think that there is scope to look at the way the scrutiny committee meetings are held. I previously raised the point about presentations taking up a disproportionately large amount of time. In my view, scrutiny should be about the elected members on that committee asking questions, delving into the detail of what's going on. There should be an assumption that members have read the reports and papers that are in front of them. Obviously, a brief outline, I think, is perfectly sensible and appropriate for any members of the public who may be watching, but the scrutiny process shouldn't be an information dissemination exercise. It should be about probing, asking questions and holding those with power to account. And that needs to be the change of direction that we have. I don't think that reducing the number of scrutiny committees will achieve that. In fact, it would achieve the opposite. It would be seen by the public as a way of reducing accountability in light of the public comments I've seen about the authority's performance in recent weeks. That would not be a good thing for the authority to do. And I would strongly urge anybody considering supporting a reduction in the number of scrutiny committees to think again. So it's not really questions, it was more stating my position, and I await further information that will be brought forward in due course. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr, Cynghorydd Carroll.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carroll. I was going to mention that this was more of a statement than a question. Councillor Bruce's hand is still up. Did you want to come back with a question?
His hand went back up rather than still up, Chair.
Yes, yes, just to come back in, I was going to say a shorter agenda sounds good in some instances, but not necessarily less scrutinies. So yes, and the well-being of the well-being of councillors and officers also should come into it. But then again, perhaps it shouldn't be bi-monthly. It could be perhaps every 6 weeks and not, every 4 as it is perhaps now. Just my suggestions. Just
Okay, diolch yn fawr Cynghorydd Bruce, na i nodi.
Thank you, Councillor Bruce. I'll make a note of that. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, James, for the presentation and the report. Broadly, I welcome this because I agree with Councillor Carroll, surprisingly, that the presentations and so on at scrutiny do tend to go on too long. There's no need for that when we have the written reports. All councillors should be reading those reports for their particular scrutiny committees and should be fairly au fait with what's going on and have made notes of any questions or any queries that they want to raise based on that report, which they can then raise in the scrutiny. That would make the scrutiny meetings more effective, I think. The reports for noting, of which we get many in some of the scrutiny committees, are we don't need the presentations on those on reports for noting at all because if they're simply for noting, then the scrutiny committee isn't actually doing a great deal with them, although the capacity is there for them to send feedback and suggestions from in addition to the recommendations that are already in there. And this too should be made clear, but a lot of the reports can just come as emails to committee members or even to all councillors for their information. The depth of scrutiny is can be improved, and hopefully this is a way of doing it. The move towards more task and finish groups doing in-depth work on specific subjects as suggested by their scrutiny committees, I think is a good move, in that it will actually put more of a burden on councillors to attend and do the work for those TNFs, especially when they are given such short periods of time to complete the work. I mean, we're talking 12 weeks tops for a task and finish group, which means some very concentrated examination of a subject, which again is no bad thing. It will focus the mind and hopefully come up with good work to strengthen the offer that the council can give. So broadly, I welcome the proposals in this. The need for five scrutinies as opposed to 4, if the reduction in topics that come to scrutiny is achieved, then there would be a need for just 4 rather than 5. So again, I can support that. I would worry about, and as I've said before in other meetings, I'm concerned about cross scrutiny committee subjects. The example I often use is with social services, with people with learning disabilities, autistic adults, autistic children would come under, autistic children would come under Starting Well, or whatever that's going to be titled in the end, and autistic adults would come under Living Well. And I'm concerned that the boundaries between the two are being blurred, and that's my only worry. And but the fine tuning of what goes where, I think, is something for debate and discussion as we go along. Thank you for that. I have no question.
Okay, diolch yn fawr iawn, Cynghorydd.
Thank you very much. Councillor Perks.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask James, so the proposal that we have for the scrutinies, how does that is comparable to other local authorities? What are other local authorities actually doing with their sort of scrutinies? So that was one of the questions I wanted to ask. And the other one was around the task and finish groups. So I just wonder, within this, since we all got elected in 22, how many task and finish groups we've actually managed to undertake, which I think the answer is we haven't. But I'm happy to be, sort of put right if I'm wrong on that. And obviously, the task and finish groups do provide a level of questioning and the business that actual councillors can undertake, where it will be taken to council and implemented. So if I just think of a couple that I was involved in, was that period poverty and what we did around that sort of subject. The cost of schooling was another one. And then the last one was housing and homelessness. And the recommendations that we put forward there are now used by the council. So I do see that task and finish groups do definitely have a place within scrutiny. So I would like to know what we've managed to achieve in this session. How many task and finish groups have we actually got through? So, do we need to build in space to actually do that so that the councillors can actually get more involved in the subjects that they choose to within the scrutiny committee itself? So those are my sort of two questions, if you like.
Okay, diolch yn fawr, Cynghorydd Perks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Perks. James, would you like to come in to respond?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Perks, for the questions. In terms of the exact numbers for task and finish groups, I don't have the exact figures for me, but I believe it to be 1 to 2, with one currently ongoing surrounding the procurement process. So, yeah, it very much has been minimal and by exception, and currently just largely due to capacity within the democratic services function to be able to support task and finish through the current ways of working. So, the proposal is very much intended to hopefully, if we can release capacity by looking at the structures, frequencies, etc. The current scrutiny functions, actually will be reducing the amount of time administering the formalities of the meeting to release that time to be able to support more frequent task and finish groups. As you outlined, I agree. I absolutely think they're a critical component of policy making, so I very much want to increase them in that space. And then in terms of what our other allies are doing surrounding scrutiny, it is a very different picture in Wales and beyond on that, where it happened obviously due to comparative benchmarking type work in terms of how many committees, what frequencies there are, etc. And it is very much a very mixed bag. We do have the ability to make it suit local arrangements. There are some councils, for example, that only have 2 committees that meet every month. There are some that have 5, 6 committees that meet quarterly. There are some that have 4 that meet monthly. There is very much a blended picture in terms of the actual volume of meetings that make committee structures and make it, etc. So it does very much vary on a pan-Wales basis, and equally within England as well. Looking at similar local authorities to ourselves in terms of size, so we'll take from previous juncture of powers. We had also a comparable size team. They have four committees currently, which meet on a monthly basis, but don't regularly undertake task and finish work. So it's a bit of a very much a mixed bag. The councils that do meet less frequently, have less committees, do more task and finish, but then there are some that meet on a systematic, very regular basis, and very much formal committee types that meet very regularly do undertake less task and finish. So it is very much a mixed picture nationally. So it's at local discretion as to how we want to interpret the statutory guidance surrounding our functioning and scrutiny. But then I think that also presents us the opportunity to do what could actually be really good, beneficial for the residents of the Vale and delivering the new corporate plan.
Is it right if I speak again? Yeah. So basically, I mean, to a certain extent, there is no sort of hard and fast rule about how you run your scrutiny committees. Then, it's sort of, there isn't like everybody has a meeting every month and how many committees that there. Well, we know that the committee sizes are different within each councils, but it's interesting to know how scrutiny committees are run in different councils, and there's no one size fits all, basically. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. That Councillor Perks. Every local authority has different political direction, ways of working, etc. So it's not one size fits all on that front. It's very much local discretion.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Diolch, James.
Thank you, James, and Councillor Hanks.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that I think I would be in favour of keeping all 5 scrutinies. I don't think it would look good to the public to reduce the scrutiny to 4 and then have scrutiny meetings every other month. And as you say, the crossovers, are going to be problematic. So I'd like to keep the 5 scrutiny committees. I think we all are in agreement that scrutiny needs to be better and it's ready for a change. The small task and finishes, they've worked well, but they are infrequent. So I think if we're going to do it, we need small pocket-sized bits. But also, who's going to chair these task and finish groups? Is that going to be the remit of the scrutiny chair? Because I think that should be the task of the scrutiny chair, to be chair of the smaller task and finish groups. So I'd just like to say that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Diolch, Cynghorydd Hanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hanks. I don't know if there's any question or comments to the response from James.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Hunt. I welcome the agreements around the need for change. I think in terms of the chairing of the task and finish group element, I think this will be for the committee to decide in terms of actually if the chair is to be involved directly within the task and finish group or not. That is very much the chair's discretion. I wouldn't want to say yes and answer to an additional responsibility and expectation on every single committee chair that they must chair every single task and finish group that their committee selects. But ultimately, that would be for the committee themselves to locally decide as and when the subjects are identified. But I do agree that there do need to be sharper but more focused task and finish groups looking at more focused topics rather than trying to tackle grants system-based topics, which could potentially take a year to 2 years in reality, actually, to really focus on those core issues.
Okay, thank you, James.
Diolch yn fawr, James.
Thank you very much, James. And I think just one of my concerns, and it's relevant to the last conversation, is to which extent people can participate. Because if there are fewer meetings in terms of scrutiny and more task and finish, this could put us in a situation where some people might opt out of scrutiny, with only a few people participating in the task and finish. So it'd be interesting to see if we do go down that route, how this would be implemented. So we've had comments from 6 people, including myself, in the meeting. Is there anybody else who would like to contribute to the conversation before we draw to a conclusion?
Dwi ddim yn gweld
I don't see any other hands. So James has heard the comments from the 6 of us who have spoken this afternoon. This will feed into the final plans with the input of next Monday and Wednesday from the other committees within the council. Of course, at the end of the day, this is a decision for full council at the end of April to forge ahead with the proposals in whichever form. Hopefully this was a beneficial conversation for you, James. And hopefully the coming conversations will also be useful in terms of designing scrutiny. And I'm sure that everybody would agree that a scrutiny needs to be effective. The question is, which is the best way to reach that goal? So if everybody is happy for us to note the contributions for those to go back to Cabinet, I'll move this. Is anybody happy to second it?
Cynghorydd Thomas.
Councillor Thomas. Okay, thank you very much. So if we move on to item 5 on the agenda this afternoon. So findings from the Democracy and Boundary Commission. James, will you be presenting on this one?
I will, thank you, Chair. And for the previous item, thank you members for all your comments. They're very much welcomed and appreciated, and as the chair mentioned, will be fed in. So thank you for that invaluable contribution. So yeah, very much looking to, in terms of this item, very much sharing the research that's been produced by the Democracy and Boundary Commission Cymru, which is research on the workload of county councillors in Wales. So the Commission commissioned a provider to undertake research to explore the impact of variable factors on the workload experienced by elected members within county councils from a variety of positions, whether it be independent and also a variety of political persuasions, whether it be cabinet members, scrutiny chairs, ward backbenchers. It very much tried to get a whole review of the whole piece. The research identified a number of factors on council workload, including the structure of wards, geography and demography, and the impact of a fluctuating population, while also considering the support provided to undertake the role as effectively as possible. Whilst I appreciate this is more to do with the research was commissioned with the intent of looking at member numbers, boundary reform, etc. But equally, I brought this to the committee today very much to look at actually how does this reflect upon your current experience as councillors in terms of how does it reflect in terms of workload capacity and ways of working, and actually in terms of the support that's provided to yourselves in terms of undertaking the role. So very much welcome views, particularly from a democratic services capacity in terms of that supporting function to really make sure that we're lined up, one, now to make sure we're supporting as best as possible, and then for the future, ensuring that any future elected members are supported as best as possible, and any potential new members in particular through their introductions to the works of the council. So again, I'm not going to give an overview of the reporting cover to cover, but it very much looked at a range of stakeholders. So they undertook a scoping stage with key stakeholders. So a series of both interviews and online surveys were sent to all elected members within Wales with a 20% response rate. And there were also some in-depth interviews for electoral registration officers. Of those surveys, 10 members from this council were involved in the research, with 2 members undertaking the in-depth interview. Due to the nature of the research and it being before my time as well, I'm not able to actually identify or disclose which members were involved. So in terms of some of the findings, so councils identified surveyed they spent an average of 28 hours per week on related to their role as an elected member, which is, when you consider the IRPW basis on a 3-day working week, there already seems to be a disparity there. Councils generally largely agreed that workload has a negative impact on their work-life balance, and there was a high expectation from the electorate, and there was a difficulty in terms of actually shutting up on the role, and that you're almost essentially constantly always on call to your ward. In terms of also has to consider the impact of single or multi-member wards and the ability to actually work, what impact that has potentially on workload for members, and there was also reflection in this around the impact of being twin-hatted and the role of working with 10 community councils. So what type of relationship that is in terms of the shared responsibilities, how that dynamic works, and what impacts that had upon council workloads. And in addition to that, also surrounding the additional impact of being a school governor, which I know many members do hold those additional responsibilities as well. There were also reflections around representing the rural areas in terms of the large geographical challenge presented. So in terms of the geographical challenges presented, that it can be time-consuming. It can be hard to also connect with residents as well due to the sheer sparsity in population and lack of almost local energy and not coming together frequently in those type of community spaces. So it's very much just to give a bit of an overview today, and probably reflecting on some of the comments earlier in terms of the biggest impact on council workload. It wasn't necessarily related to ward work, but it relates to various cabinet committee responsibilities, the frequency and volume of meetings they're required to attend, and the volume of information they're receiving, just creating the time and capacity for it. So it's whilst I appreciate this, there are a multiplicity of factors and complexities dependent upon if you're in an executive position, if you're a group leader, if you're part of a committee, if you're a backbencher. I appreciate there's no one size fits all on this one, It's very much just to have a bit of a discussion in terms of council workload, in terms reflecting on your experiences versus this research, in terms of are there any areas where you think there are challenges? Are there any areas where there could be better support provided to yourselves as members, just so you can look to see how we could look to improve the support function to democratic services to yourselves as members moving forward via the democratic services function. So that was it for the overview, and I'm just going to open the floor to any questions. Thank you all.
Diolch yn fawr, James.
Thank you very much, James. This is an interesting report because this isn't based upon only responses from Vale of Glamorgan councillors, but also nationally, 20% of councillors have responded across Wales. So I would like to emphasise that this doesn't only reflect councillors in Vale of Glamorgan, but across Wales. And as James said, I think what's important is for us to establish whether there are any lessons that can be learned, especially as we talked about in the previous item, in terms of capacity of democratic services to help and support councillors with their work. If I can start with Councillor Hanks, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to make a comment, James, and I don't mean to be rude in any way at all, but I just think what the report that you've just read out is something that we've all read. And is that like a waste of time that we could just go into questioning on that report rather than sit and listen to it being read to us again? And I don't mean to be disrespectful at all, but maybe this is where we're losing a bit of time in meetings, that let's go into it. And if we've got questions to ask, we can start digging round rather than listening to listening to it all again to be read out to us. So it was just a comment as that was happening. So thank you.
Diolch, Cynghorydd Hanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hanks. I don't want to go back to James just yet. I think there's a point, how much presentation do we expect for a report that we've already read as councillors, but perhaps the public may not have read, and so in terms of how to present the bare bones of it being important in terms of time restraints. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Chair. This one is going to be more of a statement rather than a question. I am somewhat concerned by the tone of this report. I accept that it's been shaped by consultation responses, so it is reporting those responses back to us as much as anything else. And I will emphasise that it wasn't just Vale of Glamorgan councillors who responded. The reason I'm concerned is because I think it's in danger of redefining what it means to be an elected representative, be it a member of a local council or any other form of public service, in a way that isn't particularly positive. And the reason I say that is because being a councillor, in my view at least, is not a job in the conventional sense. I don't see it as a job. I see it as public service. It's an opportunity to give something back to our society, to communities, to contribute. And so it's not like a job where you have contracted hours in the sense that you work 37.5 hours a week, potentially, maybe more, maybe less. It's about fulfilling a role within our communities. It's about taking on the problems that affect our communities, helping some of the most vulnerable people in our society. So when I see phrases like work-life balance, when I see phrases like it's very difficult to shut off, in my mind, we shouldn't really be shutting off from our roles as representatives. In my community, at least in Landock, people are very reasonable. They accept that I can't respond to every email instantly. They expect that if you have a large workload, there may be a lag or a delay. But I think this idea of turning a councillor's role into a salaried position where there are set hours, I appreciate the report doesn't recommend that, but I am concerned that it seems to be pushing the conversation in that direction, and I don't think that it's helpful. We should always remember why we do this. It is to give something back. Yes, it's a remunerated role, but it's not like a job where you go out and do the hours and in the conventional sense. It is about public service, and I don't want to lose sight of that, because I don't think it's good for either our democracy or our society if that is the direction that being an elected member moves towards. I think that that would be very damaging, and I don't think really that's what being a representative is about. You're supposed to be a community leader in that sense, and so leadership does require a form of personal sacrifice. Obviously, everybody needs the means and ability to do other things. The public are understanding of that, but I wouldn't like to reshape the role of a councillor as being a conventional job, because it isn't, and in my mind, it shouldn't be.
Okay, diolch yn fawr, Cynghorydd.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Prothero.
Thank you, Chair. An interesting report. Really good to see experiences from around Wales of other councillors. I think reflecting on the views of different, I suppose, councillors from different types of wards, we can see probably what we might have expected. A councillor in a rural ward will probably not just have different caseloads, but it will be geographically different. The time they might spend moving around the ward, I suppose that's quite an obvious comment. The amount of time people want to spend on their roles as well. I don't really know whether that is going to be equal, because these things that, depending on your formal duties, how many committees you sit on, how much work you're doing there. If you're in a rural ward, I could say for me, I've got 4 community councils, so there are lots of other meetings as well that you're going to have to take part in. I don't think it's a one size fits all in this approach, and it really is up to you as a councillor how much you want to get involved as well in your community work. You might want to set up some groups. You may have far more other things that you need to take time on. So I think I feel quite supported reading this to hear other people's experiences. How can we make it not more meaningful, but a more supported role? I think we can take some things from this. As far as democratic services go and how we work in this authority, I think it is supportive. It's supportive of people's work-life balance. It's not a word that I think Councillor Carroll likes, but I understand that and understand why it would be mentioned in this report, because to be an effective councillor, to be an effective community leader, an effective worker in maybe another role that you have, or a caring role, you need to have that work-life balance. And it's an important thing. So, yeah, I think it's good that we have our meetings often in the evenings, because that helps if people also have other roles and other jobs that they need to do. I think that flexibility of being able to, as we all are now, do some of our meetings online, most of our meetings online, that works really well. I wouldn't want to see that changing, especially for rural wards where our residents live. If you are in a rural ward, work is an activity, it's not building, as I like to say. And as far as democratic services go, I think the support possibly, although there was an awful lot of training as a new councillor in the first couple of months, online training, absolutely essential. I think how you do what and when you're set loose on your residents, you kind of feel your way. I'm not sure how that could be built in, the support of, let's just say, how many surgeries a month you should be doing, or if you should, or if you shouldn't, and how you do them. It's the kind of like the lived experience. I think whether that is something that out in the real world, there could be some form of guidance and support for new councillors. It might be something that we could look at. But yeah, I welcome this report. I think it's very helpful and very interesting to hear from other councillors in other authorities. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr, Cynghorydd.
Thank you very much, Councillor Prothero. I agree. It's interesting to see the viewpoints of others. Okay, Councillor Bruce is next on my list.
Frozen. Oh, it was frozen just then. I too think there's a huge disparity in the number of hours that councillors work. Initially, when I started, I still do almost 7 days a week, even now. But I where they base the 3 days a week, I have no idea. I would like to see the survey on, because I missed it again. I would like to see this survey that they put forward about the work that you do as a councillor. Either that I haven't got time to keep checking my emails, or I've missed it. I've just missed it. So it is very interesting, and it is very, huge disparity in everything, in lots of things.
Yeah, diolch, Cynghorydd Bruce.
Thank you, Councillor Bruce. I think they sent this out perhaps a while ago, perhaps in 2023. I don't have the date in front of me when this was originally sent out, and obviously not everybody responded. What's important perhaps is there's a tendency to use a mean average. So of everybody who responded to the questionnaire, they say they worked 28 hours a week, which equates to some 3.5 or 4 weekdays. But within that, will be a variation. So 10% saying over 40 hours each week, with this 3% saying they do less than 10 hours a week. So as Councillor Prothero said, there's quite a bit of variation in terms of how much time people put into this, but the purpose of this work is looking at wards, but also looking at how much work truly happens with our councillor hats on. And they came to the conclusion that it was on average 3 days of work in a week is what people tend to do. But obviously it's probably the case that it might be a bit more than this, but of course this is also impacted by the number of people who are also cabinet members or who receive higher salaries, if they are chairs of scrutiny committees or leaders of opposition parties and so forth. So looking under the bonnet, we might see that it's actually less than some 28 hours, but that's the average response to the questionnaire. If I could ask Councillor Marnie, please.
Yeah, give me 2 seconds. I'll find this switch thing now. Yeah, thanks. We touched on 1 and 2 of the items I was going to say. I must confess, when I saw... Can you hear me okay, by the way?
Yep.
Okay. When I first read this, I think it was the other week, and we reread it before this meeting, I almost stared at disbelief, quite frankly. I mean, councillors, as people responding, it almost seems to be given the impression they're volunteers. You're getting £20,000 a year for this. And as has been mentioned, chairs of scrutiny committees and other committees and this and that and leaders, they're up on 30, 32,000, even more. You're not volunteers. If you don't like it, resign. Get a by-election for somebody who does want to do it. There is no set hours. I mean, I actually read that people moaning that they were being contacted all hours of the day or night. Yeah, I do, and I encourage it. Anybody can contact me 24 hours, 7 days a week, whenever they like, I respond. Well, we've had this meeting here now, an email's just come in from me off a chap, something to do with the council tax, which I'll look at later. If you don't like it, pack it in. You're not volunteers. You're taking money for this. Stop whining or resign and have a by-election so somebody else can take over. I'm just staggered, quite frankly, by some of the terminology that's used in this report and other comments. Okay, thank you very much.
Diolch, Cynghorydd Mahoney.
Thank you, Councillor Mahoney. James, do you want to respond? And is there anything in the discussion which helps you and the Democratic Services team in terms of how to support councillors in future?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all members for your comments. Only one or two bits and pieces to respond to. Thank you, Councillor Hyde. Noted for your comments surrounding the presentation element. I agree there is a balance on that, but so it's noted moving forward. I think there is the element in terms of picking up on Councillor Proro's point, or actually something around supporting new members in terms of actually post-induction when you, as members, are almost thrown in with a range of absolute members at initial member training sessions, actually trying to help translate some of that into some of the real-world practical tools and tips in terms of surgeries, etc., to general organisational ward work, that kind of thing. I think there's something in terms of the general support for new councillors in that space that I think we could look at moving forward in preparation for the next election. And yes, just to really welcome an interesting conversation, recognising that obviously this is a Panrail survey that is approximately 18 months old now, but equally, this is all useful feedback in terms of as we work with trying to use this to try and recruit, trying to, all what you're saying is very positive around valuing the role of being an elected member, which hopefully we'll be able to use in terms of trying to promote future councillors for the Vale of Glamorgan. So just thank you very much for the discussion points, noted on a few elements, and we'll look to take them forward as potentially areas for development.
Okay, diolch yn fawr, James.
Okay, thank you very much, James. So we've got 3 recommendations, which is to note the national research surrounding councillor work, sharing experiences as councillors of Vale of Glamorgan compared to other more wide research which we've done, and for us to consider support available to members in Vale of Glamorgan and any possible improvements. And we have had some discussion on this too. So happy to move the recommendations there. Is everybody happy for me to go ahead and do that?
Can I throw the please?
Could I have a hand up, please? Thank you very much. So thank you very much again, James. And item 6 is the Forward Work Programme. Back to you, James.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm not going to go into this one in any form of detail at all. It's just very much sharing for information. If there are any comments, suggestions, etc. But this is very much the Forward Work Programme for the next municipal year for this committee. So focusing on the standard items, the cyclical items, which this committee would look at every year, and then also some variation of other items. So it's very much for the committee to note any comments or queries, or if there are any suggestions for topics they would like to consider moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, diolch yn fawr, James.
Okay, thank you very much, James. So the content of the programme is in Appendix A. Number of items, I think 6 for the meeting in June. More than enough, I think. Are there any questions or recommendations for additional items to go on the agenda?
Cynghorydd Hanks.
I was just wondering, when will we have follow-up following the scrutiny rearrangements? Will that come back in time, in 6 months, to follow that up to see how it's working out?
Yeah, mae hyn yn
Yeah, that's a good question, James. What is the intention in terms of seeing how so much success there is if they go through full council next month?
Thank you both, and thank you, Councillor. It's a very good question. So looking at, in terms of the proposed monitoring of the implementation, we'll be looking at an internal audit conducted in review of the effectiveness of any implementation. So what have been the lessons learned, what's worked, what hasn't worked, etc. So we will be looking at that probably 12 months after implementation. That's why it isn't within this one, because realistically, by the time all the evidence is gathered, findings, etc., I think we probably would be looking at probably autumn 26 in reality, but we will be looking in terms of the monitoring the effectiveness for internal audit to review with both members, public, officers, etc. Just to see what has worked and how it, well, if it's worked, what has worked, what needs to be done differently, etc. moving forward. But that would likely be for this committee to consider, and realistically probably the autumn 26.
Okay, thank you, James. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, diolch yn fawr, James.
Thank you very much, James. I'd like to emphasise once again that this depends on the full council decision at the end of April as to whether there are any changes to scrutiny moving forward. Are there any other questions for Appendix A?
Nag oes.
No. Okay. If we're happy, I'll move this, and is somebody happy to second? Hands up.
Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thomas. Thank you to all of you. So I don't have anything for item 7, urgent items, or any urgent items part 2. So thank you for being here in the meeting on a Friday afternoon, and looking forward to the next meeting of the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James.